The DNA opens a new mystery into our human ancestors. Scientists expected the bone to share the DNA of Neanderthals, but it's closer to the Denisovans who lived in Siberia.
The lab went silent the moment the results came up on the screen. It was meant to be a routine scan of a molar found deep in the east chamber of the Denisova Cave. Instead, the 2025 sequencing project uncovered a genetic marker that has no business being in a hominid.
We have a tiny piece of bone fragment, and the DNA, when we analyzed it from this ancient bone fragment, we thought, oh my God, this is a new branch of humanity.
This was not just a variation, it was a capability that would have made these ancient people the most terrifying hunters on the planet. And the craziest part? Modern humans might still be carrying a dormant version of this impossible code today. The impossible sequence. The computer algorithms were scanning a small fragment of a finger bone labeled merely as sample D19. At first it looked standard. You had your typical hominid markers. But then the system threw a red flag. It found a sequence, a long string of genetic code that did not match human DNA. It did not match Neanderthal DNA. Honestly, it barely matched anything in the mammal kingdom. The lead researcher thought the machine was broken. They recalibrated, they ran it again. Same result. They were looking at a gene complex responsible for a trait that humans physically cannot have. To give you some context, human eyes and ears work within a very specific range. We see visible light, we hear specific frequencies. We are pretty average in the animal kingdom. But this specific Denisovan individual had the genetic blueprint for something else entirely. The analysis revealed a fully functional gene cluster typically found in deep-sea biological life or nocturnal apex predators. It was a code for magnetoreception combined with enhanced tetrachromacy. Here is the catch. Humans are trichromatic. We see 3 channels of color. This gene suggests these ancient people could see a 4th channel, possibly dipping into the ultraviolet spectrum. Combined with magnetoreception, the ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field like a biological compass, this means they were not just seeing the world, they were feeling it in a way we cannot even imagine. Imagine walking into a pitch-black cave and knowing exactly where the walls are, not because you can see them with light, but because you can feel the magnetic distortion of the rock. Or tracking a herd of deer in a blizzard because you can see the ultraviolet trail they left behind in the snow. This is not science fiction. This is the data coming out of the 2025 analysis. And it begs a massive question. If evolution is about survival of the fittest, and this trait is so incredibly powerful, why do we not have it? Why did we lose it? Or better yet, did we ever have it, or did the Denisovans get it from somewhere or someone else? The scientific community is currently scrambling to explain this. Standard evolution takes millions of years to develop a complex eye or a new sense. This gene sequence in the Denisovan sample looks almost inserted. It appears abruptly in the timeline. The discovery is so fresh that peer-reviewed papers are still being fought over. Some conservative scientists are trying to claim it is just a contamination from a prehistoric bird or bacteria. But the sequence is woven right into the chromosomal structure of the hominid bone. It is part of them. This changes the way we have to look at the Denisovans. We used to think of them as just another group of hunter-gatherers, maybe a bit rougher than us, surviving in the cold. But this new evidence paints a picture of a species that was biologically superior to us in ways we are just starting to understand. They were the masters of the dark. While our ancestors were huddling around fires, terrified of the night, the Denisovans might have been navigating the pitch black with a 6th sense. But if they were so advanced, where did they go? That is the part that does not add up. The mystery deepens when you look at the bone itself. The predator gene. Let's dig deeper into what this trait actually does. It is not just about seeing better, it is about a total sensory overhaul. The 2025 report compares the genetic structure to that of migratory birds and certain deep-sea fish. So, here is the deal. In the retina of the eye, there are proteins called cryptochromes. In modern humans, these are pretty dormant. We use them a little bit for our circadian rhythm, basically knowing when to sleep and when to wake up. But in this Denisovan sample, the genes for these proteins were turbocharged. The analysis suggests these proteins were active in their visual system. This means they could likely see magnetic fields as a visual overlay on top of the normal world. Think of it like a heads-up display in a video game or a fighter jet. They could look at the horizon and see the magnetic north. They could likely sense approaching storms before a single cloud appeared in the sky because of the electromagnetic pressure shift. Now, why would a human need this? You have to remember the environment they lived in. The Altai Mountains during the last ice age were brutal. Long nights, massive blizzards, and landscapes that shifted constantly with snow and ice. Navigating this white void would be impossible for a modern human without GPS, but for a Denisovan with this trait, the landscape would be full of information. And get this, the second part of the discovery, the tetrachromacy, is even wilder. Most mammals lost their color vision millions of years ago to survive the age of dinosaurs. Primates regained some of it, which is why we see red, green, and blue. But this Denisovan gene allowed for a fourth cone type. This is usually reserved for birds and reptiles. This implies they could see patterns on flowers, animals, and even skin that are invisible to us. A tiger hiding in the brush might look perfectly camouflaged to a Homo sapiens, but to a Denisovan, it might have been glowing like a neon sign. This makes them the ultimate apex predator. It explains how they survived in such harsh climates for tens of thousands of years. They did not just endure the environment, they hacked it. But it gets stranger. The energy cost of maintaining a brain and eyes like that is massive. The calorie intake required to power a nervous system that processes magnetic fields and ultraviolet light is off the charts. They would have needed to eat constantly. High-fat, high-protein diets. This aligns with the massive teeth we have found in the cave. Denisovan molars are huge, way bigger than ours or Neanderthals. Scientists used to think this was just for chewing tough roots. But now, with the 2025 DNA context, it looks like an engine intake. They were consuming massive amounts of fuel to power a biological supercomputer in their heads. The crazy part is that this trait seems to be unique to the Denisovans. We have sequenced Neanderthals, and they were strong, sure, but they were sensory matches to us. They saw what we saw. The Denisovans were operating on a different frequency. This raises a controversial point. Were they a completely different species? Biology says if you can breed and produce fertile offspring, you are the same species. We know humans and Denisovans interbred because people in Melanesia and parts of Asia today have Denisovan DNA. But, and this is a big but, we do not see this supersense gene in modern humans. It seems that natural selection actively weeded out. When our ancestors had babies with Denisovans, this specific trait was seemingly too expensive or too complex to keep. Or maybe it was incompatible with our wiring. It is like trying to run a high-end graphics card on an old office computer. The system just crashes. So we kept their immune system genes, which help us fight viruses today, but we lost the superpower. Or did we? Some researchers are now looking at junk DNA in modern populations, the stuff we thought was useless, and wondering if broken fragments of this code are still floating around. Have you ever met someone with an uncanny sense of direction, or someone who gets migraines before a storm? Maybe that is not a coincidence, but the rabbit hole goes deeper than just biology. The giant connection. This is where things get controversial, and that is putting it lightly. When the results of the 2025 analysis leaked, the internet went wild with theories. And for once, the scientists could not just dismiss them out of hand because the data is so anomalous. The main issue is the speed of evolution. Traits like complex magnetoreception usually take millions of years to refine. In the Denisovan timeline, it appears relatively quickly. There is a theory gaining traction called introgression from an unknown hominid. Basically, the idea is that the Denisovans bred with something else, something older and far more specialized than us. Scientists call this a ghost population. We have never found their bones, but we see their shadow in the DNA. Could this ghost population be the source of the trait? And if so, what were they? Some anthropologists are pointing to the legends of the region. The Altai Mountains are full of folklore about guardians or watchers, giant beings who lived on the high peaks and could see everything. These beings were often described as having eyes that shined in the dark. For centuries, we thought these were just myths, but now we have physical evidence of a people who could literally see in the dark and navigate invisible fields. It forces us to ask, were the gods of ancient mythology just Denisovans? Think about it. If you are a simple early human and you meet a guy who is 7 feet tall, based on the tooth size estimates, who can navigate a blizzard without looking up, and who can spot a predator a mile away in pitch blackness, you do not call him a man. You call him a god, or a demon. The 2025 analysis also revealed something else disturbing. The genetic diversity in the Denisova Cave was incredibly low. This implies they were a small, tight-knit group. They were not spreading out like we did, they were holding the fort. What were they guarding, or what were they hiding from? The isolation might explain why the trait became so strong. It is like an evolutionary pressure cooker, but it also makes you wonder about their intelligence. Brain scans based on skull fragments suggest their cranial capacity was huge. If they had this sensory input, their processing power must have been immense. So here's the deal. We have a super-sensing, massive-brain giant cousin who lived alongside us, and then, poof, gone. Or were they wiped out? This brings us to the competition theory. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, arrived in the region around 45,000 years ago. We were smaller, weaker, and half-blind compared to them, but we had numbers, and we had aggression. Did we eliminate them because we feared them? There is a chilling possibility that our ancestors recognized this otherness in the Denisovans, that uncanny valley feeling, when you look at something that looks human but acts supernatural. It triggers a fear response. The DNA analysis shows that while there was interbreeding, there was also a sharp decline in the Denisovan population right when we showed up. It is possible that this trait no human should possess was the very reason they were targeted. They were too different, too capable. But nature has a funny way of hiding things. Hiding in plain sight. Let's fast forward a bit. The 2025 study did not just look at the old bones. It compared the sequence to modern environmental DNA samples taken from the soil in the surrounding mountains. This is a technique where scientists analyze the dirt to see what animals have peed, bled, or shed skin there recently. And what they found is baffling. There are trace amounts of genetic markers in the high-altitude soil of the Himalayas and the Altai Range that are undefined. They are not human, not bear, not monkey. They share a structural similarity to the Denisovan anomaly. Now, I am not saying Bigfoot is real, but actually, let's look at the data. For centuries, people in these regions have reported the Yeti or the Almas, wild men of the mountains. The descriptions always match: large, nocturnal, avoiding contact, moving with impossible speed in difficult terrain. If a small population of Denisovans or hybrids retaining that specific night hunter gene retreated into the most inaccessible peaks to get away from us, could they have survived longer than we think? The no human should possess trait is specifically designed for high-altitude, cold, dark environments. It is the perfect survival kit for the top of the world. The 2025 analysis suggests that this gene makes the blood incredibly efficient at carrying oxygen, far better than the Sherpa adaptation we know about today. It is entirely possible that while we were building pyramids and writing on papyrus, the last of the pure-blooded Denisovans were watching us from the peaks, using their magnetic vision to stay hidden. The timeline of their extinction keeps getting pushed forward. First, we thought they vanished 50,000 years ago. Then 30. New evidence hints they might have been around as recently as 15,000 years ago. That is yesterday in geological time. And what about us, the modern humans? As I mentioned earlier, we carry their DNA, but usually it is just a small percentage, like 3 to 5% in some populations. However, the 2025 study found that in certain isolated populations in Tibet and Melanesia, there are ghost segments of DNA that are much longer. It implies that the interbreeding was not just a one-time thing deeply in the past. It might have happened in waves. The implications for medicine are huge. If we can unlock this gene, the one that allows for magnetic sensing and ultraviolet vision, could we engineer it back into ourselves? Imagine eliminating blindness or creating humans who can navigate space without instruments. The resonance architects. Now hold on a second. If we accept that the Denisovans had this super sense, this ability to see magnetic fields and visualize the hidden energy of the Earth, we have to ask a massive question. What did they build with it? For decades, archaeologists have been scratching their heads over impossible stone structures found in Russia and parts of Asia. We are talking about the megaliths of Mount Shiraya in southern Siberia. These are not just big rocks. These are blocks of granite that weigh over 3,000 tons. To give you a clear picture, the largest stone ever moved by modern humans with heavy machinery was only about 300 tons. The stones at Mount Shiraya are 10 times heavier. They are stacked on top of each other like children's blocks, 400 feet up a mountain. Mainstream science says this is just natural geological formation. They say the rocks crack that way. But when you look at the seams, they are curved. They fit together with a precision that defies nature. You cannot slide a piece of paper between them. So here is the wild theory that the 2025 genetic discovery is fueling. What if the Denisovans were the ones who moved them? And what if they did not use ropes, pulleys, or brute strength? What if they used sound? This sounds like magic, but stick with me. We know that everything in the universe vibrates. Every rock, every piece of granite has a natural resonant frequency. If you hit that frequency just right, you can alter how that object behaves. With the enhanced hearing and the magnetic vision discovered in sample D19, a Denisovan might have been able to see the frequency of the stone. They wouldn't just look at a 3,000-ton block of granite as a heavy object. They would see it as a wave of energy. Some fringe researchers are suggesting that their magnetoreception allowed them to align these massive stones with the Earth's magnetic grid to make them lighter. It is a concept called diamagnetism. If you apply a strong enough magnetic field to an object, you can technically levitate it. We do it in labs today with frogs and water droplets, but the Earth itself is a giant magnet. If the Denisovans had a biological connection to this field, could they sense the ley lines or the high energy points on the planet where gravity is slightly weaker? Could they have used their voices, which likely had a much different vocal range than ours due to their massive chest cavities, to create a resonance that disrupted the gravity around the stone? It creates a terrifying image. Imagine a group of 7-foot-tall humanoids standing in a circle around a massive boulder, humming a low-frequency chant that you can feel in your bones. And suddenly, this mountain of rock starts to float. They guide it into place not with cranes, but with sound and magnetic alignment. This would explain why we find these impossible structures in the exact same region where the Denisovan fossils are found. It explains why we cannot replicate their work today. We are trying to use mechanical force to move the world. They might have been using the code of the world itself to hack the physics engine. And this ties into the legends of the local people in Siberia. They have oral histories that go back thousands of years. They talk about the ancestors who could make stones walk. They speak of singing giants who built the mountains. We always thought these were just cool stories to tell around the campfire. But now, with the genetic proof that these people perceived reality in a totally different way, those stories sound a lot less like metaphors and a lot more like eyewitness accounts. This also changes how we view their intelligence. We usually judge ancient people by their tools. We find a stone axe and we say, okay, they were primitive. But what if their technology wasn't physical? What if their technology was internal? If you can navigate by the magnetic poles and see the ultraviolet spectrum, you don't need a compass. You don't need a map. If you can manipulate matter through resonance, you don't need a crane. A species like that wouldn't leave behind gears or metal circuits. They would leave behind perfectly cut stones and silence. This theory of acoustic levitation or vibrational engineering suggests that the Denisovans were not just surviving in the Ice Age, they were the masters of it. While our ancestors, Homo sapiens, were chipping away at flint to make arrowheads, the Denisovans might have been shaping the geology of the planet. But this immense power brings up another scary thought. If they could tune into the Earth so deeply, they would also be the first to know when the Earth was about to turn against them. And that leads us to the most disturbing theory of all. The reason they disappeared might be because they saw something coming that we were too blind to see. The prophet of the poles. Let's talk about the end of the world, or at least the end of their world. Geologists know that the Earth is not as stable as we like to think. Every so often, the planet goes through a geomagnetic excursion. This is when the magnetic north and south poles decide to go on a road trip. They wander off, the magnetic field gets incredibly weak, and the Earth is bombarded with cosmic radiation. The last major event like this is called the Lachamp event. It happened roughly 42,000 years ago. Now, look at the timeline. 42,000 years ago is almost exactly when the Denisovans vanish from the fossil record in the open valleys. It is exactly when the Great Silence begins. For a modern human or a Neanderthal, a magnetic pole shift is bad, but it is not instantly fatal. You might get more skin cancer, the weather gets crazy, and the birds get lost. But for a Denisovan, for a creature whose entire brain is wired to the magnetic field, it would have been absolute psychological torture. Imagine if your vision was tied to a GPS system and suddenly the satellites started screaming. Imagine if the heads-up display in your eyes that showed you north, south, and the safe paths suddenly dissolved into static and chaos. The 2025 analysis of the Denisovan brain structure suggests their magnetoreception was central to their nervous system. When the Lachamp event hit, the magnetic shield of the Earth collapsed to about 5% of its current strength. For us, the sun just looked a bit brighter. For them, the sky was likely screaming. The radiation hitting the atmosphere would have created massive, constant auroras, lights in the sky that never stopped. To their ultraviolet sensitive eyes, the world would have been bathed in a blinding, chaotic energy. The theory here is that the magnetic excursion drove them insane, or it drove them to the only place where the signal was quiet: underground. This is the hollow earth theory, but grounded in biology. If the surface of the world is blasting you with radiation and magnetic chaos, you go deep, you go into the caves. But you don't just stay in the entrance, you go miles down. We know that massive underground tunnel systems exist. Look at Derinkuyu in Turkey, or the Longyu Caves in China. These are massive man-made underground cities that could house tens of thousands of people. We have no idea who really built the oldest parts of them. We assume it was humans hiding from invaders, but what if it was Denisovans hiding from the sun? If they retreated deep into the crust of the Earth, their magnetic sense would actually be an asset again. Down there, shielded from the solar winds, they could navigate the magnetic veins of iron ore in the rock. They could find water sources instantly. They could live in total darkness because, remember, they don't need light to see. They see heat, they see magnetic fields, they see the rock itself. This exodus to the underworld theory is gaining massive traction because it explains why we find their DNA in the soil of high mountains and deep caves, but we rarely find their bodies. They didn't die out in a war, they didn't starve, they just moved their civilization to a basement we cannot access. There are strange reports from miners and spelunkers all over the world. Stories of tall beings encountered miles beneath the surface. Stories of feeling like they are being watched in the deep dark. Usually, these are dismissed as hallucinations caused by bad air or isolation. But let's look at the sample D19 data again. That gene for processing oxygen, it works just as well in low oxygen, deep cave environments as it does on high mountain peaks. Their physiology was perfectly designed for a life away from the surface. This leads to a chilling realization. We assume we won the planet. We assume we are the masters of the Earth because we built skyscrapers and highways on the crust. But the crust is just the skin of the apple. There is a lot more fruit underneath. If a remnant population of Denisovans survived the Lachamp event by going subterranean, they could still be there. Evolving, changing. Maybe the UFOs we see coming out of the oceans and disappearing into mountains aren't from outer space. Maybe they are from inner space. If they mastered vibrational technology and magnetic propulsion 40,000 years ago, imagine what they have now. While we were busy inventing the wheel, they might have been perfecting the art of gravity manipulation in the safety of the deep Earth. It puts a whole new spin on the alien phenomenon. We look at these grays or these tall, pale figures described in abduction cases, large eyes, telepathic abilities, and aversion to bright light. Does that sound familiar? It sounds exactly like a biologically advanced Denisovan descendant. Maybe we are not looking for little green men from Mars. Maybe we are looking for our long-lost cousins who moved into the panic room 40,000 years ago and never came out. And honestly, can you blame them? They looked at the surface, a place of chaotic weather, shifting poles, and a violent, rapidly breeding species called Homo sapiens, and they decided to lock the door. The 2025 discovery of the supersense gene is the key that unlocks all of this. It connects the megaliths, the underground cities, the giants, and the modern sightings into one cohesive, terrifying timeline. It suggests that we are sharing this planet with a species that is not just physically superior, but one that views us as the primitive ones living in the harsh, blinding light of the surface. They are the Watchers, and they have been watching us for a very, very long time. So what do you think? Would you want this night hunter vision if bioengineers could give it to you, or do you think some genetic doors should stay closed? This discovery is just the tip of the iceberg. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button and subscribe for more mysteries the history books left out.